All right, I started some topics and start with an apology because I haven't finished what I promised. Still working on that, but the more I work on it, the deeper I get down this rabbit hole. And I've recently kind of had, the UFC wake-up call in a slightly different flavor that I didn't expect. What's the UFC wake-up call? Well, if you guys are into martial arts and were into martial arts, say in the early 90s or before that in my case, those initial UFC bouts taught us a lot. When all the different styles got together, got in the octagon and pressure tested what worked, and what came out of that seemed to be the lesson that when you're talking about human beings, the human body, if the name of the game is unarmed combat in a confined space with, a couple of safety rules, the stuff that works, all starts to look the same. Now, is it the same? I've done a video on pragmatic versus ritual martial arts, and in that video I said, ritual martial arts aren't necessarily pragmatic. They tend to be the opposite, but that doesn't mean they're worthless. There's still useful information in there. But even if you're talking about very pragmatic arts that on the surface look the same, you've got to consider, are they? And this is kind of where I'm at, just kind of rethinking what those delineations are, specifically in swordsmanship. Now, obviously, I came to that UFC revelation in terms of my empty-handed martial arts, back in the early 90s with everybody else, and changed my practice accordingly. However, my practice of swordsmanship, even though I shifted it from ritual to pragmatic a long time ago, and distilled it down to, of all the different kinds of swordsmanship I've studied, I've kind of lumped them into three categories based on, more the weapon than anything else. My three favorite kinds of swords, in order of first to third, would be the katana, followed by the Chinese jian, followed by the Dao. Now, the Dao is actually my least favorite, but since it's such a primary weapon of Chinese swordsmanship, I've worked with it a lot, and I have a comfort zone with it, and it's not my first thing to pick up. I do prefer the katana over all other things, and then the jian. But all this time, I've kind of felt like they were all very different styles of swordsmanship. I did mention that in my practice I did crossover. Took some of the things I learned from Jen and Dao and applied it to katana and vice versa, and improved them all in the process. But I've still been practicing feeling like they were very, very, very separate things. But the more I study HEMA, the more I'm having, again, kind of that UFC realization, where if the name of the game is human being with long, sharp, pointy, slashy, choppy, stabby object, what works universally, and we're talking across history and, the whole world, people seem to come to the same basic conclusions, so a lot of the things that work look very much the same. But are they? Well, first of all, one of the things I'm noticing, just like the difference between a katana and a jian and a Dao, a couple of major things you have to consider about the weapon itself more than, say, the style. And that would be, how long is it? Maybe how heavy it is. How curved is it? Double edge, single edge kind of goes along with that. How much hand protection does it have? That's another big one. Is it a one-handed, two-handed, or kind of half and half, hand and a half sword? And a couple of other things like, how is it worn? This is going to come back into my conversation of where katana sits in terms of still being the best sword, or at least what it's good for. We're going to talk about this a little bit more. How are these very similar looking things different? Well, you got to consider, if you went back in time to when swordsmanship was, critical for personal defense and warfare, and we're talking periods of hundreds of years, there were thousands and thousands of schools, masters, teachers, skilled practitioners in any given area. But like I described in Ritual versus Pragmatic Swordsmanship and the first part of the Katana Versus series, over time, yeah, those became less and less and less. Hema completely faded, pretty much, whereas something like Japanese swordsmanship, yeah, reduced to several dozen schools, shall we say, that are still in constant practice, and many of those have ritualized. Chinese martial arts, yes, there's dozens of styles, but most of them are very ritualized. Not too many of them practice pragmatic swordsmanship. They're actually reviving their pragmatic swordsmanship based on what Hema's doing right now. And I do want to address that. However, you got to consider, even if you're talking about something like MMA or BJJ or something like that that works in mixed martial arts, Muay Thai, different coaches teach different things. Different schools teach different things. Everybody's got their own little thing to try to make their fighter just more effective, potentially, in that fight. So even though there's a lot that is the same, little key things that may be critically different. So this gets me to kind of the point of the video and my dilemma. I don't consider myself a master practitioner. I've just been around a long time. But what can I offer? I have the same issue, and I kind of compare it to my career as an author, that the various swordsmanship arts are the same, just kind of like literature is the same. And not just specifically the language it's written in, but, we kind of recognize there are structures to stories and the way you develop characters and stuff like that. And there are people out there that would say, there are no new stories. Nobody has any new ideas. And I kind of worry about that myself as an author. In writing my stories, am I adding anything worthwhile to the genre? So, am I? Let's move the camera, and I'll start making a couple of videos, and we'll see if I indeed do have anything to add to the conversation.